2 years on from taking over the care of Hembury, a prehistoric hill fort in East Devon, Carol Jevons was approached by a potter who for some years had been studying the composition and design of Neolithic pots. Based in Plymouth, she suggested that with the blessing of natural England, they visit the Lizard Peninsula in Cornwall and dig up a small supply of Gabbro clay. A question remained over the fine Gabbro bowl that was found at Hembury and now housed in the Royal Albert Memorial Museum in Exeter. Was the bowl made in Cornwall, or was the clay traded to different parts of the country? The quest proved both exciting and rewarding.
I'm Angie Wickendon. I became interested in archaeology when I was 13 years old with the Tutankhamun exhibition in the British Museum. I became interested in the Neolithic pottery from the southwest as there was a fabric found at Hembury called quartz tempered pottery, and my dissertation was on that pottery, and I was testing the thermal resistance of the pieces of quartz in the pottery. And then I wrote a course on prehistoric pottery making as I'm now a pottery teacher. This time we decided to go and dig out the Gabbro clay, and Mallory is a marine archaeologist in Plymouth and wanted to learn more about ceramics, so I'm teaching her about prehistoric pottery from the region and also techniques and processes and materials that are involved.
My name is Mallory Haas, and I am a maritime archaeologist that started off in terrestrial archaeology, working with inner city kids. And I took Angie's potting course to learn a bit more about the people and the materials around me that we've excavated, and it's just been wonderful to see it all come into a finished product. So here's some of the clay that we dug out from Cruiser A. You can see that you can work it very well with your hands. And it was exciting because I'm a novice, so this was my first experience with doing any kind of potting or retrieving your own clay or processing clay. So we processed this. So we went outside, I crushed everything up, and then we added a certain amount of water to it to get it into this state where you can start molding it and making tiny little pots, what Angie taught me, which was they're little pinch pots, and then to build up into something with this. So for me, being able to go out, having never done it before, and just find clay right away that had been used in prehistoric Neolithic sites was really exciting. It really put everything into perspective about how these people were living and where exactly everything was at.
This little pot is a replica of a Neolithic pot made from Gabbro clay from Cruiser Down. It's a round-bottomed pot. All early Neolithic southwest British pots were round-bottomed pots. It's in a state called leather hard, where you can actually work the clay and the clay actually sticks together. Now this clay was really, really difficult to work while it was soft. It isn't very plastic at all. It's what we call a very short clay, and it's hard to work. It's like using a very, very crumbly pastry, and I had real trouble getting it to stick together. But I got there eventually, and I left it in a mould and left it to go much harder. And now, if I get a pebble, I can actually hold it like this and start to work the surface. We're going to talk about the experimental Neolithic potter's toolkit now. It was the Stone Age, so there would be no modern materials, rubber, plastic or metal. In its place we've got shells, bone, flint, rawhide. There's some sinew, which is rawhide as well, a bit of chamois they would have had, and paddling a pot on a pebble creates a round-bottomed pot. The carination on this can be formed by using your thumbs around the pot once it's leather hard, and using your thumb as a rib. That is a rib for shaping those internal and external curves. A pebble can be used as a rib like that, and on the inside of the pot to firm the inside of the pot. That's how that pot was made. The piece of bone can be used to trim the rim, the excess off the rim. The pebble is also used to burnish the pot like this, and this will consolidate the surface and will also help prevent it breaking during the firing. It'll increase its thermal resistance.
So now I'm just burnishing this little Gabbro pot. So what's interesting is that from clays that we took, the 4 different sections, is that they're all very different. And the one that I have here is from Cruiser A. And this has a lot of inclusions in it, and it was very hard to get into this position of a pot. We had to paddle the bottom of it, we had to put it on our fist and shape it, we had to leave it dry for quite a while to get it into a position where it would stay together. And you have to think about how the Neolithics and the Stone Age were trying to get a pot made for their dinner. You know, that just would have been so frustrating, you know, over an evening, but we know that they were using Gabbro clay.
These are the tiles that we made from the Gabbro clay we dug out from the Lizard. These are the low temperature, 750. These are the high temperature at 1100. And they've all survived. We've got no bloating, no melting of the clay, which shows us that we've got a clay that can go up to high temperatures. 1100 is a high temperature.
And this means then that the pots that we put into the fire that we're going to build potentially won't break apart.
Yeah.
Having discovered that the Gabbro clay could tolerate a large range of temperatures, Angie and her friends booked into Alan Bruford's forest school at Beacon Cross Copse, which lies to the west of Hembury and looks out to the hill fort. First, a raised bonfire was established, and then the group got to work, preparing different ingredients and fashioning pots, whilst Robin Sullivan worked up some clay. Robin told Angie that the Gabbro clay, which he had dug in 2016, was much easier to work with than the clay recently excavated on the Lizard. And perhaps this would suggest that the clay was traded rather than being fired on the Lizard, as it would have improved in plasticity as time passed.
So I'm just going to be slowly moving this one round to get the entire thing as hot as possible before we start actually submerging it within the fire itself. So you can kind of just see a smaller pot down there that's been in there about an hour now, that's now glowing hot red. But we're going to bring these all up to kind of the right temperature and then slowly extend the fire around.
As the temperature in the heart of the bonfire slowly increases, Angie turns her attention to the building of a wood-fired kiln, which will fire more pots at even higher temperatures.
Oh, it's quite sandy underneath.
A suitable site is chosen on the woodland floor, and it's all hands on deck. The kiln requires a deep circular hole and then a trench leading from it to direct the air.
Right, that'll probably be long enough, and then we want a circle here. Okay?
Alan and Robin barrow in some suitable clay to build the actual kiln. This will require puddling, whereby straw is added and then the whole stamped and shredded to a soft and pliable consistency, using the same method as you would to construct cob.
It is quite dry. It is quite dry.
The pit is now ready, and Skip, an expert in the building of wood-fired kilns, is drafted in to construct it. A clay pillar is placed in the centre, and radiating from it, like the spokes of a wheel, he builds a floor to take the pots.
So when you spin out,
Yeah, I think with the size of that one, it gives.
And then it's like putting a baked potato in.
With the pots suitably arranged, they are then covered with the puddled clay. It's now time to light it. Alan brings in some kindling and a fire is established, raising the temperature slowly but surely.
Yeah, right. I do like those.
It's going up. It's going up. It's very slow, but that's what we want because we don't want the pots to fire too fast.
Back at the bonfire, the other pots are nearly ready. They've been firing for a good 4 to 5 hours, and Angie explains the ideal temperature for a successful outcome.
Ideal temperature to start firing a pot like this is about 600, where once all the water has been driven, the molecular water has been driven out of the clay, and then what you can do after that is really take the temperature up really high, and you can go as high as you like as long as the clay will withstand the temperature. At Gabbro, as we've discussed many times amongst us, is we now know will go up to 1100 degrees C. So it won't bloat, it won't warp, it won't melt.
800. Really hot over here.
It's an exciting moment. The pots are glowing red, and one by one they are checked and slowly released from the fire. Robin has made a bowl fashioned on the Hembury Gabbro bowl, and as the embers fade, he is thrilled to bits to find it is still in one piece. Much has been learnt about Neolithic technique. As night falls, the forest kiln is watched over and supplied with wood. It will take a good 5 hours to fire the pots, and then a further 18 hours for it to cool down before the kiln could be opened. But when it is, the team are very pleased with the results.
Quite achieved a replica of Hembury bowl, but it's a Gabbro bowl and it's fine and it's not got a crack in it.
Angie presents Carol with a Gabbro pot to say thank you for not only being given the opportunity to make pottery, but in recognition of his care and preservation of Hembury. He is thrilled to bits.
Fill me in with what's been going on.
It is 2 years since the visit to the museum in Exeter, when musician Jim Causley, who had been inspired to write a song rooted in Hembury for his album Forgotten Kingdom, came and chatted to Tom Cadbury, the curator of antiquities, about Hembury's Gabbro bowl. Tom brings the bowl to the table again, this time surrounded by the Neolithic-style pottery fired at Beacon Cross Copse, and is fascinated by what Angie and her colleagues have achieved.
So these have been made and fired as close as possible as they would have been in the Neolithic.
The clay, this is actually a mix of 2 different Gabbro clays, so the same site and location, but actually over 2 different time periods. So I've been digging clay down on the Lizard since 2016. So it was actually a mix of some of the clay that I dug down in 2016. We realised that, well, I realised as a complete novice, that actually the longer I stored the clay, the more plastic it became, so able to actually create much finer vessels. So it's a mix of the 2016 Gabbro and then also the 2019 Gabbro. And then I also fired this one, so it was made down in Cornwall and then taken up to the Beacon Cross site where it was then fired in an open kind of hearth firing. So realising kind of the time period the original bowl was made, I made the decision to actually kind of start a fire, slowly dried it on the kind of outskirts and then moved it within there, covering it slowly with more fuel to then kind of fire it. Until you could literally see it glowing red. Like the whole vessel itself was kind of glowing red. At which point we then kind of slowly take it out of the fire, which gave us this one.
So when I took on Hembury Fort in 2010, I never expected this extraordinary connection through the pottery side. I had no idea. I hadn't even been in RAM then, I have to admit. Sorry, Tom. And it's just a beginning again. And I'm sure that Sunday morning we opened the kiln up and you took the stuff out of the fire. The people who fired that had that same feeling of, wow, we've made another pot. It's an extra, that is not any old pot though. It's a bowl and it's fantastic.
Tom, you've been the curator of this magnificent bowl for quite a few years. Personally, I've learned a heck of a lot about the bowl itself and clay and the making of bowls, Neolithic period. But do you feel like you've learned anything new through this whole project?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And that's the benefit of bringing all these clever people together to look at objects such as this amazing bowl. I mean, this is a star exhibit in the museum. It's been here since the 1930s. And yet, you know, just over a couple of years, we have learnt so much more about it. And I guess my job has to be to tell all our hundreds of thousands of visitors about all that new learning and about, you know, how exciting. And it's really about the people behind the bowl, isn't it? Okay, it's focusing on the bowl, but it's really the lives of the potters who made it, the people who quarried the clay in Cornwall or Brittany or the Channel Islands, wherever. A bit more research there. And the people who might have used it, the people who might have treasured it, what it meant for Hembury and the area, because I think this was such a special piece for those people.
In just a few months, much has been learnt about the pottery found on Hembury. Angie's dedication to the making of pots, similar to those of the early Neolithic, has shown that these peoples were not only trading far and wide, they had mastered sophisticated skills. The Hembury bowl was discovered by Dorothy Liddell in the early 1930s whilst excavating the Iron Age hill fort. Imagine her excitement when she realised that she had uncovered a much earlier use of the hill, a causewayed enclosure dating to some 5,700 years ago. And there is still much to discover. 90 years on, under the stewardship of Carol Jevons, the exploration of Hembury continues.
Blow the windy morning, blow the winds I speed away the morning dew, how sweet the winds do blow, and it's blow the windy morning, blow the winds I and it's speed away the morning dew, how sweet the winds do blow.